purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny. Digadonken sin frei. No person can deny. Digadonken sin frei.
Hello, I'm Don Lawrence for Freethought Forum. We're happy to have you with us today. We have a really interesting subject to talk about. Our executive producer, Catherine Fahringer, has gotten a special guest for us, Paul DuBay, and we're going to be talking about, I hope you noticed the clever title we had on our program, the way Perpetrators was spelled. There's some question about who actually gets affected by this drug war, who profits from it, and whether or not the drug war actually has the effects that it's purported to have. So we'll cover that a little more in a moment. I'd like to take just a moment to really thank you again for watching our program. Catherine has worked for many years to get people in this area, and of course she's affiliated with the Freedom from Religion Foundation and a number of organizations. She's worked really hard for a number of years to encourage our audience, our viewing area, to use your mind to think, not to simply accept dogma, not to go by faith, but in fact to consider evidence, to look at all sides of an issue, and to get beyond just what you're acculturated to believe and what various sources of authority would have you believe, whether it's on matters of sexuality, of religion, of drug use, of politics, any of these major areas of life. I'd also like to take a moment right at the beginning of the program to thank the people who help us put on this program, both Jan King and our other camera person, Bert Crichton. They have really been, again, soldiers in the cause to help us put this program on, and we want to make sure that they get the recognition that they deserve. So we'd like to go to the subject for the day, and there's been a lot of writing in the paper, a lot of discussion on television about the drug war, and supposedly what we can do to affect particularly young people's behavior toward drugs. I have with me a magazine. It happens to be the current issue of a magazine that writes primarily about the rock and roll scene, but it also contains a very literate discussion of a lot of other subjects. For instance, in this issue, if you've never had occasion to read the writings, let me see, yes, P.J. O'Rourke, right here. If you've never had occasion to read the writings of P.J. O'Rourke, I think he has a valid claim to being our modern-day Mark Twain. He's not very reverent toward anyone that he writes about, but he also writes in a very analytical fashion. I think you'd enjoy his writing. One of the articles in this issue specifically deals with the war on drug, the new ad campaign that was unveiled by Bill Clinton a few weeks ago, and the title of the article is "This is Your Government on Drugs," and it calls into question whether or not this campaign does anything more than, one, demonize the people who use drugs in any fashion, and two, feed tremendous amounts of money into large ad companies, large ad agencies. So with that sort of teaser, we'll get right to our guest, Paul DuBay, and let him give us his views on the drug war, and get Catherine, of course, as usual, to act as a gadfly and put some of her perceptive questions to him.
Okay.
Paul, please.
Well, thank you, Don. My main thing to address is the drug war from the perspective of institutionalized violence and, if you will, chemical statism. We're supposedly involved in a conflict that is to stop the spread of drugs, to the harm done to people by drugs, and just like anybody else, no one wants to see anybody hurt by drugs, of course, but we must also ask what cost is this, are all these preventive measures, what are they doing to our public? First and foremost, that I have seen is there is a large amount of disinformation. I spoke about that with Catherine on 2 previous shows. For instance, you will hear that cannabis, hemp, marijuana causes addiction, brain damage, lung cancer, these kinds of things. And we find out that according to the Merck Manual of Diagnosis and Therapy, the world's most widely used medical text, that this simply is not true. Now, I'm not saying that they should, young people should be going off doing it and using the drugs. The point is that there is a lot of misinformation. And if we can, as a people, can have so much disinformation about the most widely used illicit substance in the United States, then what else are we being misinformed about?
Exactly.
Case in point, and this is one of the first things that opened my eyes several years ago to the issue, was when I discovered that cannabis seeds, again, cannabis is hemp, marijuana, is actually a source, a very viable source of protein. In fact, it's one of nature's most perfectly balanced foods for dietary protein and essential oils. Now, that, of course, does not come up in common conversation. I didn't make that up. My source on that is a book called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. The author is an internationally renowned nutritionist named Udo Erasmus. And in there, he explains in far more chemical medical terms than I can relate here, that this is basically the case, that we as a people have outlawed one of the nature's most perfect foods. So then with that, then we have to start looking at other things. Well, if we're misinformed about this, then what else are we saying to people? And there's a lot of misinformation. And then when we add to that we've made this food illegal, and then we add the cost of persecuting, or if you will, persecuting.
I call it persecution.
Thank you. And enforcing these laws that are based on misinformation. Then we start getting into, then we have to start questioning what really are we doing. We can sit down and there is a litany of problems that have emerged from the original prohibitions. Like I said, to begin with, not only has food been made illegal, we now imprison more people per capita than any other country on the planet, and we're supposedly the land of the free. Since 1988, depending upon what statistics you believe, over $150 billion has been spent in support of law enforcement and other agencies to stem the tide of drugs, whereas drugs are as plentiful as ever. There's nothing less on the streets today than there were back in 1981-82 when then President Reagan started this, the current drug war, although which actually dates back farther to when President Richard Nixon actually began it. And then, like I said, the litany continues. We have, like I said, mandatory drug testing of people, which many people perceive as guilty until proven innocent, which again turns our laws upside down. And again, the litany just goes on and on. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, okay, I don't want my kids hurt by drugs. I don't want to be hurt by anybody with this, but are we in fact doing more harm than good? We have seen, since the beginning of the war on drugs, we have seen an incredible increase in official corruption, both at all levels of government, both at home and abroad, as well as a corresponding increase in narco-terrorism by those factions that we're supposedly fighting against. And it just seems to continue to escalate. So we seem to be part of a problem that is growing, not diminishing.
Yeah. And so many of the things that you describe, one of the things that refreshes me so much about Catherine is she says, well, use your mind, you know, think, you know, and it just seems that, you know, that people don't really consider the evidence. Isn't that what frustrates you so much, Catherine?
Yeah, it does, because if you've got evidence, look at it, for heaven's sakes. That's why I want people to hear what Paul has to say, because you've been doing research on this for 10 years, haven't you?
Yes.
At least.
I did it as very informal research, I would have to say, but please.
But I'm so proud of him. Look at this wonderful book, and he gave it to me on drafted. And can the camera get the title here? And then this was a little pamphlet thing he did, the State of Disunion address.
It's a little parody on the State of Union address.
Which is quite
see,
clever.
the first one is How to Instruct About Cannabis, Alternative Perspectives to Failed Educational and Public Policy. And what was the second one there? The State of Disunion Address.
Don't you love it? Very cleverly done.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and he's been published several times, haven't you, in the Express News? And we're waiting and hoping that another piece is going to come out very, very soon. We faxed them last week. And,
one would hope.
But yes, so go on with your...
And as long as you're mentioning the books there, and that relates to the drug education aspect of it, and this is something that a lot of people don't like to hear, especially when you, and it reinforces what you were saying. Catherine says think, and we do need to critically think. That is that a very popular program, when I was on the Carl Wigglesworth radio program a few years ago, a caller called in asking about the DARE program, which is very popular, not only in Texas but nationwide. And the simple fact of the matter is that all major reputable research studies that have been done on DARE since its inception have concluded that basically DARE just does not work. I could get into the negative fallout from using DARE, but the main thing is even the U.S. Department's, the U.S. Department of Justice's own study conducted by the Research Triangle Institute said this isn't working and we've got to stop. And yet they just recently had the kids fair here in San Antonio, which a lot of the proceeds went to support the DARE program.
What exactly is DARE? Could you kind
DARE
of
stands for
briefly...
Drug Abuse Resistance Education. It is instructed by police officers who go into the classrooms, and I will not belittle their intent except from an educator's point of view, and many police officers feel this too, that they're just getting into an environment that is not theirs. The simple fact of the matter is, for me to become an educator in the classroom, I had to take umpteen hours of college credits and get certified and what have you. The DARE officer takes, unless the program has changed, takes 80 hours of training and then is in the classroom for 17 weeks with the children.
Right.
And you know, they haven't gone through the steps that an educator has had to complete to get into the classroom. And conversely, you know, if I were to take a class and take 80 hours of how to handle a gun, how to read somebody their rights and do these kinds of things, and then go out and be a police officer, well, they would laugh. You know, this is, you know, obviously I would not be qualified to do this, but conversely, that is what's happening. They're coming into the classroom. And like I said, all the research studies, not only the Research Triangle Institute, but there were others, all of them show that DARE just simply does not work.
And that's resulted, as a matter of fact, I believe it was this last Sunday, within the past week, I read that the city of Austin is dropping the DARE program, that they will not fund it next year.
Yes.
For precisely the kinds of
And if I understood correctly, San Antonio Independent School District dropped it as well. Let's see, I heard of numerous others as well have done so. And yet there are still others coming on, jumping on the bandwagon. So it's kind of an iffy situation. But it kind of goes back to what I was referring to, is that there's just, instead of this, everything's smooth and cool in dealing with this, there's a lot of controversy about it. Are we doing more harm than good? And there has, like I said, there has been fallout, and I don't wish to bring up those limitations except to say that there are other programs that are proven to be successful, and those are the ones that concerned parents should be looking at. A Partnership for Drug-Free America ad saying this is your brain on drugs, an egg in a frying pan, is really nothing, and to continue with that kind of mentality when really the only force is if you do drugs, you're going to be in jail. What kind of message is that? There's got to be better incentives, like just good health, clean living, to aspire to higher ideals than just the threat of prison or punishment, this kind of thing.
You know, I feel that a discussion of this kind wouldn't be complete without bringing up the drug policy of the Netherlands. I'm not a scholar on the subject, but I did take the trouble a couple of years ago to read in its entirety their drug policy, and they specifically dedicate paragraphs to the subject of marijuana as a gateway to hard drugs, and after extensive research, they specifically deny the entire concept of marijuana as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
You are 100% correct.
Our gateway.
Well,
You are correct.
That's what I've heard so much too.
Sure.
That's a stepping stone to harder stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was real interesting. There was a show that was really very poorly done on Frontline back in April, I believe, and they mentioned the gateway drug. They mentioned the Schaefer Commission report from 1972, which was sponsored by then President Nixon. And in that report back in '72, they clearly denounced the gateway drug notion. And there are no clinical studies that support the gateway drug theory, and yet that's what keeps coming up in a lot of people who are in this very narrow mindset. And so we just basically, that's why I quoted the Merck manual at the very beginning to say, look, and you don't have to, so there, you don't have to take my word for it, you can go to a library or a bookstore and find out for yourself just exactly what it is. And yes, the gateway drug theory is a myth, but it's great for propagandists. So
you get the catchphrase, there you are, there are so many of them, that's one for sure. It's catchy and everybody picks up on it, and they don't think, and they don't research it, and they don't study it, and they don't
respond to the
do anything.
propaganda.
They say, hey, that sounds great, gateway drug, oh yeah.
And thus, just to conclude then what you were saying about the Netherlands, which our infamous drug czar has done his best to try to lambast, the people over there, and they're a very populated country, they're one of the most populated countries in Europe, they simply will tell you flat out that it does not exist, the gateway theory is irrelevant, and what they practice over there is a lot more tolerance, is basically what it is. And rather than being spoon-fed massive amounts of intolerance here in the United States, they put things in perspective. And what they have done, in essence, is to isolate cannabis users, if you will, especially the younger people, to isolate them, provide a safe environment, and then conversely, they crack down on the harder drugs.
Exactly.
Pun intended. There, we'll crack down. But so that, with all due respect to the people of the Netherlands, that's kind of a quick summation of their perspective on the matter. But they have a lot more policies of tolerance just in general, which for some reason to some people tolerance is synonymous with hedonism and chaos, and that's just not true. If you go to the Netherlands, you see that they just do not have the violence, both institutionalized or street violence, that we have in here today.
Exactly.
So there's definitely lessons to be learned. The problem is certain people who have made their political careers by maintaining a let's get tough perspective have put themselves in a corner where tolerance just is not an acceptable avenue to them.
And that's the point that this Rolling Stone article makes, is that there's really a tremendous amount of money being made by these ad campaigns, and the money doesn't go to the community level where they can where they can pay for education programs that have been shown to have some effect. Instead, these millions of dollars go into the coffers of these slick ad agencies to put these ads on TV, which have no demonstrable effect. What I wanted to tie back this Netherlands program to remarks both Catherine and you made was that in their drug policy, at the conclusion of talking about this discredited stepping stone or gateway theory, is the idea that young people, that the value of credibility with young people is extremely high, that you have to maintain your credibility. And if you sacrifice your credibility with the populace and young people in general, in specific, by feeding them disinformation or by distorting things to the point that they no longer trust you, then your entire approach becomes ineffective. So credibility is high on the list.
Definitely, and that's what makes the job of responsible educators all the more difficult, because there is so much false information out there. So then, to add to then what you're saying, I mentioned earlier about food being illegal, the cannabis seeds, I should say. And then we see that there is very much an active movement in the United States for the medicinal cannabis, which people have voted for, and then government officials turn right around and say, well, we're going to ignore the will of the people and go ahead and prosecute them anyway. And we see that, and we see the mass prison building and this kind of thing, and we have to ask ourselves flat out, we're going to sit here and continue to outlawing food, persecuting the sick? Are we going to continue to increase, spend money on programs that do not work? My perspective is what I've seen, and comes from someone that I mentioned earlier, President Nixon. To end the violence and the social chaos of the Vietnam War years, basically one day he just said, it's time to declare peace with honor. And that is very true of the drug war today, especially since it's being waged in our own backyard. And we do see the citizenry, as they slowly become enlightened, are contacting their representatives, and they are voting to change this. There's not only for the medicinal uses of hemp, but also for the industrial uses as well, for the seeds, the fiber, the paper, and there's just numerous things that you can do with it. So that is something that needs to be addressed, and it's not going to go away. I saw an expression once: the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s, and there's an
I like that expression.
There's an element of truth to that when we see this. This isn't a hedonistic society run amok. We have to believe that there is somewhere an inherent goodness in people, that that this will be turned around. Like I said, we don't want to see people hurt, but by the same token, if not safe, there you go. And if we're not safe to drive down the roads because we can be pulled over and searched, or when people are coming into the country and the customs people go exercise the full powers that they have to basically wage war on innocent citizens, we have to ask ourselves, do we want this to continue? Absolutely. And that's really the questions that I am trying to pose today. It's not a matter of yes, we must have extreme law enforcement or the society is going to run amok. If you look throughout history, cries for security and law and order are basically the age-old bellowing of oppressors. So that's nothing new. So obviously the answer is somewhere in the middle ground, and learning to just slow down, be a little bit tolerant, and just a simple good old practice, just love thy neighbor, will go a long way, will be a lot better than filling up prison cells with more and more people. Yeah, absolutely. When we see all of these people, ending up in prison, and they bring up the issue of persons who have not otherwise committed any major harmful crime to society.
They smoked a joint. Big deal. They smoked it 3 times. Now we put them away forever.
Yeah,
Doesn't that seem kind of stupid?
Yeah, well, it just seems. It's there's the whole question of then what kind of environment, what kind of behavior do they learn, what kind of behavior are they exposed to, and what kind of atrocities might they individually suffer.
That's a
as
major
result.
question.
Yeah.
What is more adverse to human health?
Yeah.
Ingesting cannabinoids
Yeah.
or arrest, trial, imprisonment, asset forfeiture, these kinds of things.
I understand there's a lot of hard drugs going into the prisons too. So when you
Yeah,
get
they haven't been able to
drug-
keep them out.
Well, that's the way they mean the gateway drug. I mean, the gateway being you smoke a joint, you get thrown in the joint, and then you're introduced to hard drugs. Well, could be.
There you go. I mean, it is true that as stringent and as get tough as policies have been implemented, along with the curtailing of civil liberties for the last 15, 17 years, with all of that, still, drugs aren't even kept out of prisons.
Yeah.
So and they're talking about now we got a random drug test, all the prisoners, and this kind of thing. And it just goes on and on and on. And finally, we have to ask ourselves, my tax dollars are going to this. Well, this person here, instead of spending $25,000 a year to keep them in prison, that's somebody we could be putting in college.
Exactly.
And so it's really a shift of priorities. And just like the Vietnam War, the time came when social healing was politically expedient, not war. And that's again what we're facing today.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your coming and talking to us. I assure you that this is a subject that I have a deep personal interest in.
Sure you do.
Besides just having conversation to pass the time, I believe it's a factor that really affects our society, and I think it comes close to undermining the trust of our populace in the government as a whole. I hope we get a chance to talk to you again.
Well, thank you.
If you'll come back, we'll cover some more ground, I assure you.
I'd be honored.
What I'd like to do is give you just a teaser for our next show. We're going to have a celebration here in the Central Texas area, October the 4th in Comfort. You can get more information by calling the telephone number that appears at the end of our show. The celebration is a dedication of a cenotaph that is as the committee chairman informs me, a monument is a cenotaph with dead bodies under it. So it's a marker to the freethinkers who settled here in Central Texas, in such places as Comfort and Fredericksburg and Luckenbach. It will be in the Comfort Park at 1 o'clock on the 4th of October. We'd like everyone who's interested in free thinking and in the history of free thought in Central Texas to attend. There will be booths and food and speakers and all kinds of things. What were you going to add there?
I'm not sure about the food. You got to pay for that.
Oh yeah, you got to pay for the
rest
food.
is free.
You have to pay for the food. So I'd like to thank Catherine and Paul. Thanks again to our crew, Jen and Bert, for helping us put this show together. We'd like to challenge each one of you to consider what the title of this show is about. A forum where you bring ideas, and free thought in particular, where you use your mind to back away from dogma. We'd like for you to become a free thinker. Please join us again for the next episode, the continuing saga of Freethought Forum. Thank you very much.
As I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To Duke or dictator, no person can deny